that you are not allowed to say, right? The freedom of speech does not extend to inciting violence or threatening the lives of specific individuals. That is not permissible. Beyond that, we will map. Look. We haven't talked much about it, but if you read the counterterrorism strategy, it's a very clear document. We don't shy away from telling the world what we're going to do. We are going to map out these individuals. We are going to identify them. We're going to find this is, God bless Scott Besson, Kash Patel, yes. AG, the acting AG, Todd Blanche. The money trail. The money trail is the most important thing. You look at these from the river to the sea, bring the Intifada to the streets of America. It's so interesting. You're on the campus of Berkeley, or you're on the streets of New York, and everybody has exactly the same placard, printed with the same font. That's a little bit strange. So, I can't discuss, ongoing operations, but the importance of malign foreign actors who leverage domestic fellow travelers. We lived this for 40 years during the Cold War. We will get to the bottom of all of it, whether it's the Singham Network, whether it's Iran, whether it's Russia, whether it's anybody else. Our mission is to uphold the Constitution and at the same time protect Americans from violence.
The White House just published a 16-page counterterrorism strategy vowing to kill American citizens that they deem enemies. Quote, "We will find you and we will kill you," signed by President Donald J. Trump. And I want us to pay close attention to the language in this document, because the last time white supremacists published a document, a lot of people said, fuck that document, I ain't reading that shit, it is what it is. And then 53% of the goals in Project 2025 actually became reality, like the regression of voting rights across the country, the rollback of LGBT rights, the decimation of the...
And the Jews going off once it starts to get into all that rainbow stuff. All praises to Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, who will and teach well, who taught us this truth. I came across this video here, I think it was yesterday, by this man Sebastian Gorka, and he mentioned the counterterrorism manual, which is why I played that second video, because that second video tells you what he referenced, man. And I mean, it's clear, plain as day. This is what things are coming to. The goal of this man is to, if you hurt Americans or are planning to hurt Americans, we will find you and we will kill you. Signed by the big man himself. And when I say big man, he is obese, man. Okay, so some people might come across this and say, well, you're stretching the truth. Well, wait a minute. The wording here is very broad. The wording says, or are planning to hurt Americans. Well, they can twist what we say and, say that we may be planning to do that same thing, right? Jeremiah 28 verse 8, the prophets that have been before me talk about doom and gloom, right? Ain't that what we go into? Well, somebody might take that as us making threats, man. And of course, it goes without saying, we're not here for violence. Violence isn't going to set us free. We're here to preach the truth of Yahushua, because just as the scripture says, no man shall buy you. The escaping of this captivity isn't through a man. It's not through a political agenda. It's not through moving to a different country. Our salvation comes from the sky, man. Okay, and also, when I came across that video, that's proof, man. That's proof that we are still in captivity, man. See, this is supposed to be, according to the understanding that had been pushed down our throats as kids. This is the land of opportunity, the land of the free, of the brave, the land of freedom. No, Baruch 3:8. Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity. See, we that's exactly what we are, man. We're not free to go about. I mean, every 5 days, 6 days a week, man, we have to wake up. We have to go to a job we don't like, and we have to give our life, man. Like, literally, how many times do we hear about Tim Cook or Steve Jobs? He was quoted saying that money didn't matter, but time and his health was was the biggest, wealth that he had. We're giving our time and our health, whenever we go to work and build up, these Edomites empire. We are this day in our captivity, and we have to work, man. Because if you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't work, you got nowhere to live. And even more so, when you have family, having a family is supposed to be a blessing, man. The scriptures talk about, matter of fact, so that I don't just quote that, children, direct blessing, KJV. This is Psalms 127 and 3. I remember I read this years ago, and it stuck out to me. Matter of fact, let's get it in the CEV. It says, straight to the point, Psalms 127 and 3 says, children are a blessing and a gift from Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. But yet, the gift of having seed here, it gets turned into captivity, man. Because now, the captivity gets put on you that much more harsher, because now not only do you have to be a slave for yourself, but, you have to provide for your family, and, we're not complaining about providing, man. But, everyone knows at this point that the wages that we are being paid when compared to the cost of living, these are slave wages, man. So, yes, this is captivity, man. It says, where thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments, according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which departed from the Lord our God, man. And so, we understand that this is judgment. We are in our captivity because we went off. Our forefathers went off, and we, understanding reincarnation, we also went off in our past life, man. So now, from there, I want to go into this freedom of speech, because that's something that he started off with. And we all know what freedom of speech is, but, this is that double speak that he goes into, because he says, well, he says that they want to protect freedom of speech, but at the same time, matter of fact, let's play it back here, all right? Let's play it back right here.
Right? The freedom of speech does not extend to inciting violence or threatening the lives of specific individuals. That is not permissible.
And again, somebody can come across our videos and say, oh, well, they're inciting violence. They're saying, Esau got to go. He does have to go. We're not going to change that. We're going to turn our ways. But the way that Esau goes is by the chanting down of Babylon, man. By, putting the truth out there so that the 144,000 can be sealed, man. But, freedom of speech, it says, is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their options and ideas without fear of retaliation or censorship or legal sanction. We don't have freedom of speech. If we had freedom of speech, I should be able to say anything I want about the so-called, Jews. We shouldn't have to censor ourselves when it comes to vaccines, man. If we had freedom of speech, we wouldn't have to use code words, man. Like retard. People get offended by that now, man. People have lost their jobs behind certain words. You call that freedom of speech? This is all just an illusion, man. This has been the illusion that everybody has drank from, and they themselves have began to censor themselves out of fear, and that's exactly what freedom of speech is. To be able to express yourself without fear of retaliation. Now what are we being told? Which, it's common sense now. Be careful what you post on social media. Because why? Because somebody might track you down, dox you, and get you fired. How is that freedom of speech, man? There is no freedom of speech. There is a freedom of the narrative, man. You can only say what has been shown to be acceptable by the mainstream media. But freedom of speech is what, these are the rights that they lied to hundreds of thousands, millions of soldiers to go fight, in Vietnam, man, or in other wars, saying we got to go fight them because they're trying to take your freedom of speech, they're trying to take your rights. Communism is under your bed. People died for this freedom of speech, man. But it was all for a lie. See, while these soldiers were going across and dying for their, so-called rights, they were just being used as cannon fodder, man, to build up these Edomites' empire, man. Ain't that a trip? Ain't that a trip that they told these people go and die for this, and now he's using the speech that, men and women have died for protecting. Man, that's why we can't trust this devil. Psalms 55 and 21. It says the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. Okay, and the reason I bring this precept up is because he's promised everything. All right, but the promise that he gives you is always for an ulterior motive, man, because he'll promise you something, have you go fight for it, and then take it away, or begin to chip at it, censoring, demonetizing people. You know what I'm saying? And then writing laws, man. Matter of fact, we can well, no, just for the sake of time, we're not gonna get it, but Wisdom of Solomon, the second chapter talks about their strength is their law. They for there's the fact that they can write laws, that in itself proves to you who the wicked is, because Job 9 and 24 says the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Well, who are the group of people that are writing laws? Who's dictating which boat gets bombed off the coast of Venezuela? Who's dictating the sanctions put up on Cubans, the so-called Cubans, man? The wicked, man. This is the whore that rides the beast, man, because the beast, goes into NATO and the EU, but they all play a part in those sanctions, man. That's why the scripture says, though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not go unpunished, man. Even if this guy tries to use all these other nations and tries to use their bunkers, they're not going to go unpunished. All right? That ultimately, what this is going to lead up to is it's going to lead up to Amos 8 and 11. It says, behold, the days cometh, saith Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but that is coming. Okay? That is coming. Revelations, the 6th chapter, talks about that black horse. Talks about a day's pay, for a loaf of bread. But that's coming. But other than that, it says, but a famine of hearing the words of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. So how do people hear the words? Well, it's not through Christianity. Christianity has always been around. All right, and that in itself, that should tell you that that's not the truth, because the scripture talks about the world hates the truth, man. What is that? John talks about John, the 1st chapter. The light came into this world, and the world knew it not. That's a rough paraphrase. It talks about that they would rather believe a lie. No, that's 2 Thessalonians. Yeah, that's 2 Thessalonians 2. But the point is that Christianity, that's not the word of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. The word of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai is the truth, man, because the Bible is 100% true. All right, I'm gonna say that. But unless you have the spirit, unless you have the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that Bible does you no good, man. That's basically a gun without bullets, man. See, the word of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai are these videos that go out, starting from the apostles on down, and that's what that guy is leading into, these broad laws, so that they can say, oh well, what, that's stoking fear, that's what's that other word, that's inciting violence. We're not inciting violence. And what's another thing he said too? He said, matter of fact, let me play that part again here.
You're on the campus of Berkeley. Bring the Intifada to the streets of America. It's so interesting. You're on the campus of Berkeley, or you're on the streets of New York, and everybody has exactly the same placard, printed the same font. That's a little bit strange.
First of all, I can't stand the way that this dude talks. Man, he talks with a heavy tongue. I don't know. I know that there's a term for it, but it's disgusting. The point here is that he's sitting there getting on his political opponents because they're all stating the same political belief. Well, hold on a minute. It was just brought out about a month ago that so-called Republicans on Twitter were being paid for their tweets. That's why when you go through your feed, you'll have like Trump just had his visit with China. There was basically the same tweets. Oh, Trump gets so much respect from Xi Jinping. This has never happened. And then there was another influencer. Oh, America is respected on the stage. They were parroting the same thing, and it came out that they get paid to shield. But yet, this guy, even though he does it himself, man, this guy is calling out his opponents for doing the very same thing, man. That's why it goes back to that Psalms, man, and it's gonna get people are beginning to wake up to this, man. People are beginning to see that America is just a facade, man. Jeremiah 51:7. I'm gonna go ahead and end it up and end it with here. It says Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh Shem Yahushai's hand. Again, the land of opportunity, the land of freedom of religion, but yet they have a problem with all the Muslims. You know, the land of freedom of speech, but they have a problem with your speech. Again, it's never been about freedom. It's always been about the freedom of their narrative. Believe what we tell you, and if you don't believe what we tell you, as the fat man said, we will find you and we will kill you. That's what it's coming down to. People think that we, amplify these things. No. That's a straight quote from the president. We will find you and we will kill you. That made all the earth drunk, and the nations have drunken over wine. Therefore, the nations are mad. And they're mad because they're starting to wake up to the lie that has been thrown over their eyes, man. So the warning has gone out, man. People, the famine of the word is coming, and they are writing laws to begin to cover themselves. To the next one, Shalom.